How do the Reds measure up against the teams that made it to the 2024 postseason? Well, we're going to tell you on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans that, between the two of us, have almost 14 years of experience covering this Reds team in podcast form. We are glad that you're alongside us here today because Locked On Reds is for the Reds fan that knows what happened. They want to know why. And we're going to tell you why on today's episode, how the Reds could stack up with the current playoff teams, what they need to do to get on that level next year, and a unfortunate update about a beloved offseason activity, Redsfest. It's not happening. We'll tell you why here coming up later on in today's show. That's all coming up on today's Locked On Reds podcast. That is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly when you play $5. Prize Picks. Run your game. And where we will begin today, Steve, is we're watching the playoffs. You're watching the playoffs. I'm watching the playoffs. A lot of great baseball being played in most of these games. There's been a couple of games where it's like nobody wants to pitch, but I keep thinking about, what the Reds would have done in this situation, what would it looked like. And while there are definitely some areas where I'm like, yeah, the deficiency of the Reds would have really shown through, I do think there are some similarities that the Reds aren't that far off.
Not that far off is probably a good place to start. There are some things I think where we can start just by acknowledging the things that are pretty simple to acknowledge. There was a big to-do about the first three teams in being all of the $300 million payroll teams. That's probably the first thing we can acknowledge. The teams that are making a run in this postseason are the teams that really tried, with the ownership groups that were willing to spend money in a big way. We understand that. We understand the Reds aren't one of those teams and probably aren't ever going to be one of those teams. But that being acknowledged and that being said, you're absolutely right. There is some hope when you look at this Reds team and its roster and you look around what these playoff teams are doing and you think, well, the Reds have that. The Reds have the ability to steal some bases. The Reds have players that are disrupting to the pitchers. The Reds have guys that can be clutch. And I know we'll get into it a little bit later. There's really only one big area this team needs to overhaul in order to, I think, compete on this same level. But you look at the Reds pitching staff as an example. They've got that ace to go in game one of a playoff series. They've got a rotation that you can set up to have a 1, 2, 3, 4 guy that's really, not going to take it easy on the other team. They have all of those things. So I know people probably rolled their eyes when they heard the intro and like, oh, well, where did the Reds stack up? They don't, because they're sitting at home. But this Reds team does have some pieces and parts that are just missing a little bit of help to, I think, at least be in this conversation.
And there's so many years past. I mean, we are going to be... even if the Reds make the playoffs next season, there's going to come a time when we reach the anniversary of the last time that the Reds actually advanced in the playoffs, and it'll officially be 30 years. I don't think they will advance in the playoffs before that anniversary happens, so they can't do anything about that. But for many of those 30 years, at the end of the season, we look around and we're like, what on earth do the Reds have that they can build upon next year? There are so many different things they can do now when we're looking into 2025, but also looking at some of the deficiencies that they have, I think they can be fixed simply by guys taking the next step. The biggest thing for me, and this is, I think, the biggest area where the Reds are deficient when you look at them compared to the Cleveland Guardians, is that the Cleveland Guardians have Emmanuel Clase. And not everybody else has an Emmanuel Clase. They don't have the best closer in baseball. But even the New York Yankees have Luke Weaver. As weird as that is to say. Because the Reds had Luke Weaver and that wasn't worth anything. But Luke Weaver has been lights out as a relief pitcher in these playoffs. They just need an arm to get hot at the right time. They don't have to have Emmanuel Clase, although that would be nice, but you could have that lockdown guy because Alexis Diaz showed early in his career that he could be that guy. Could he get back to that form? I think a lot of it just has to do with, can Alexis Diaz figure some things back out again?
Yeah, Alexis Diaz can get right. There's a couple things that need to happen. It's a little bit about him getting right, and it's also a little bit about the Reds have to find the sweet spot for usage with him.
Yes.
They went from 2 years ago overusing him to where we were worried about his arm was going to fall off to last year. Really, quite frankly, they didn't use him enough, and they weren't in save situations enough for him to get the regular type of work that he needed. I think that impacted him. Chris Welsh alluded to that. Brantley alluded to that. Sadak alluded to that. That there were 10-game stretches where Alexis Diaz is not pitching in a save situation. That's a problem. So you fix that, you get him into more save situations, but what they still lack, what they still need is a partner for him, a back of the bullpen 1B to work those other days so that when he's not going, you've got another guy. I've already said I hope that that's Graham Ashcraft. I hope that he can go in there and kind of take that role. I think he could be that guy. So the Reds have that. If they can get Alexis Diaz regular work and have a little bit of help for him, then they've got the back end of that bullpen where I would feel a whole lot more comfortable when Terry Francona points down there in the 8th and 9th inning.
Yeah, because that's the other thing that Cleveland and New York really both have that the Reds don't have. On top of the shutdown guy at the end of the bullpen, the Yankees have Clay Holmes, who they can kind of employ wherever point in the game. They can just bring him out of the bullpen and pitch him when they need him. And the Guardians really have two guys. They have Cade Smith and they have Hunter Gaddis, who are both just lights out. The moment that they don't think their starter has it, they can bring him out and bring in one of these guys and just shut things down. This happened, even though the Guardians ended up losing Game 2 there in the Bronx, they were able to kind of limit the damage in one inning where it was clear that their ace, Tanner Bybee, just didn't have his best stuff. So in the second inning, they pull him, they bring in Cade Smith, and Cade Smith shuts the door for a couple of innings for them. And that's the kind of guy that you're referring to, and that I think that would really bring this bullpen together, really tie the whole bullpen together. The other part of this is a key thing that all of these teams have, except maybe for the Guardians, although they do have a couple of guys that can hit the long ball, but the Reds need the long ball back next year. I mean, it was a absolute thorn in the side of the Yankees, even though they were winning, is that Aaron Judge really hadn't had a great postseason up until Game 2 of the LCS, and then he just uncorks a long ball and everything is fine. Because you don't have to hit 300, 400. You don't have to do Billy Hatcher stuff in the World Series if you can take one swing and change a game.
If Billy Hatcher, wow, going back into my
That's how far back we gotta go.
Wow, just 750 Billy Hatcher, I love it. No, the Reds do lack somebody that can run into one and provide that death blow when you need it. And that's really probably the single biggest. They've got to go get that. There's nobody coming up that can do that, really, that you can honestly rely on. There's nobody in the current starting lineup that probably fills that role. I mean, there's guys that will hit for some power, and I would like to say that Spencer Steer is going to be a 25 home run guy next year. I'd like to think that Ellie's going to push it out to 30. I'd like to think that Tyler Stevenson could go between 20 and 25, but I want a 35 home run, 40 home run threat guy, and that guy's not in a Cincinnati Reds uniform right now.
No, and I think you can squint your eyes really hard, maybe turn the lights down dim and say, maybe CES could be that guy, but he's got to prove it. There's not a thing that I'm saying that I'm expecting him to do that. He's got to prove that he can be that guy. But I do think that kind of along those lines, the Yankees, the Guardians, even the Mets and the Dodgers are proving that there is a very key aspect that the Reds have to hit on. And it's honestly something that Nick Krall has been telling us all along is their aim. But it's not something that we are constantly harping on. I'm going to tell you what that is coming up next. Did your fantasy season get off to a rough start? Bounce back with Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's so easy to see why Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app, because you can win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 picks. You got to check them out today, because literally it's so easy to turn $10 into $1,000. I absolutely love Prize Picks. And all you need to do is pick your favorite players like Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase and find your favorite stats and click more or less. And quite frankly, when it comes to Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, you're clicking more because they're getting more. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game.
That feels like the Jeff Carr clause. You don't even need to win to get your bonus money. I love it.
Yeah, But hey, we're talking Reds baseball here today, all day, every day, all week, all month, because we are Locked On Reds every single day. Make sure you subscribe to get 30 minutes or more of Reds talk in your feed every single day, all throughout the offseason, all throughout the preseason, all throughout all seasons. All right, Steve, so we're kind of talking about this whole thing, how do the Reds stack up with the playoff teams, and, what do they have? And honestly, the biggest reason that this entire idea was even just brought upon me was I was watching the Yankees and the Guardians game 2 of the ALCS, and the Yankees got picked off twice, or I think they got picked off once, and Anthony Rizzo was trying to go from second to third on a hit, and he got thrown out between bases. They had two blands, thrown out on base, but like an nincompoop, on the base paths like a nincompoop, in the same inning, and they still ended up winning. The Reds never could seem to come back from those mistakes throughout the season. And one of the biggest reasons was they didn't have the power. But the other part of this, and the other part that I'm noticing with all of these games, who are the big time heroes? Because Shohei Ohtani has not shown up. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is not really pitching all that well for the Dodgers. Let's look at some other, the big guys. Bury the lead here. The big guys for each team were developed by those teams. And I think that is something that we've heard so much from Nick Krall, and yet outside of Ellie De La Cruz and Tyler Stevenson right now, we're kind of wondering, is this going to work?
Well, it's that thing we've been talking about for several months where these teams have multiple players that get hot at the same time. They have multiple players that can do things, and if one guy's down, there's 2 more dudes that can pick him up. And really, I mean, if we're being honest, that's what the Reds lacked. It's not that they don't have the individual talent guys, is that they were never able to get in a groove. They were never able to get hot. There was never any consistency, and that's why their manager lost his job. Was all of that David Bell's fault? Probably not. But did he contribute to it? Yeah, he sure did. And did his culture, did what he create in that clubhouse and with this team lead to part of that problem? Yes, it did. That's why he's not here. I think we'll see an improvement with that under Terry Francona. I think that these guys are going to be playing harder. They're going to, I go back to Francona's press conference of they're going to play the game the right way. I'm looking forward to that. I think that that's going to lead to these guys where there's more than one player hot at the same time. So where if somebody's having a bad day, there's another dude to pick it up. And that helps the Reds move forward. That gives you these moments where, it's not Ellie, but Ellie's having an off day and CES is having an off day. And here comes Spencer Steer and Tyler Stevenson. And those 2 guys go down. Well, here comes Jonathan India and, hopefully Mr. Outside Higher power hitting right-handed outfield bat. Man, we need an acronym for that. Here comes those guys in order to, help pick things up. So there's you don't have to squint real hard to see how this Reds team could mirror what some of these playoff teams are doing as far as multiple players being hot at the same time and really, driving this offense forward.
Mr. Outside Harry. So Mo. We would call him Mo. It might be a little confusing, but no, I'm with you. I think that the manager plays a big role in all of this, and who is, I don't know, who's the best manager in this playoffs right now? I kind of think there's an argument to be made that it's Stephen Vogt, even though he is fresh off the bench, like just barely became a manager this year, but he learned and he became the guy that he is under Terry Francona. So I think that the Reds are really set up nicely with that. But there is like a lot of connect. I mean, Aaron Boone obviously with the Yankees, but Carlos Mendoza for the Mets was the bench coach for Aaron Boone with the Yankees. Then Dave Roberts played for Terry Francona, the 2004 Red Sox, like the team that broke the curse. So there's lots of connections here, I think, that you can kind of see that. I think there were a lot of folks that were giving Dave Roberts a lot of crap early on, especially in the Padres series, where it looked like the Padres might win that series and knock the Dodgers out in the first round of the playoffs again. And then they were able to salvage things and come back, and now you're not worried about him. Aaron Boone, there's a lot of questions about him. If he loses early on in the playoffs, is he going to lose his job? Now he's looking like, yeah, everything's fine. Although if you ask our friend Stacy over at Locked On Yankees, I think they could win the World Series and she still would want him to be fired. So there's a lot of that. But at the end of the day, like, it really feels like Terry Francona is the guy.
There's nothing like a Yankees fan, right? And bless Stacy's heart. I mean, but she is just the epitome of a Yankees fan. And you're right. That is definitely the attitude. I think winning breeds winning, Jeff. All of these names, you talk about how they're all interlinked, how they all have had involvement with each other. At the end of the day, all that winning has rubbed off on these guys, and it's a trickle down of winning. And I think it's partly it's the attitude, and it's something that Barry Larkin hit on when he talked about guys kind of being complacent and okay with losing and not having that hunger. And that's what these playoff teams have to a letter. All of them have that hunger to win. And I hope that's coming. And I think that it is coming. I can tell you that Terry Francona didn't come out of retirement not to bring that mindset. It's coming. And it's going to be different around Cincinnati next year. And I'm looking forward to it because this mentality that all of those managers and all of those players that are in the playoffs right now have, that's coming to town.
Yeah. And Tito is the kind of guy that got the most out of the Guardians, even though the Guardians didn't go out and spend the most money in free agency. So there's definitely that aspect to this as well. Is like, yes, the Reds are going to go make some moves. They didn't sign Terry Francona, so they didn't have to go make moves. But I do think we will start to see the best being brought out of these young Reds players that we have been hoping the best will come out of. Let's change gears a little bit, though, because there was an update, a unfortunate update that I think we kind of feared was going to happen. We're going to tell you why the Reds will not be having Redsfest in 2024 coming up next. Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time you stop worrying about your performance and get Hims, so you can feel confident knowing you can get hard and stay hard whenever you're in the mood. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/LOCKEDON for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Prices vary based on product and subscription plan.
Listen, we know there's times you can't watch us here on YouTube, and you can take us with you wherever you go. Just click subscribe on any podcasting platform. We're going to be there. You can take us with you in the car. You can take us to the gym. You can take us wherever you're going to be so that you can get us in the audio feed when you can't watch us on YouTube. We appreciate it. Tell your friends we want to talk Reds baseball with them as well. All right, Jeff, there's a couple things to get to in this segment. Let's start with Redsfest because the Reds are truly dropping a ball here. Cincinnati Enquirer reported yesterday that the Reds have officially nixed Redsfest for the 2024-2025 offseason. And that's a big miss. They have a new manager. They've created a buzz. There's a little bit of excitement. And I understand Duke Energy is under renovation. I understood Redsfest couldn't be what it has always been. But you could still have found a way to make something happen in a smaller scale or multiple sites, do it more like the Caravan, and find a way to keep the fan base engaged, give them an outlet to be excited about this team. I think this was very short-sighted on the Reds' part to not find a way to pull something together.
Yeah, I remember this was some months ago. I got the chance to email back and forth with the fellow who runs the Sharonville Convention Center, and he told me, he's like, there is no complex within a 100-mile radius that can support them for what they do at Duke Energy. And I definitely understand that part of it. I'm not saying that I expected them to carbon copy Redsfest into another convention center, because Duke is huge, and I get that. But that's where I'm at with you as well, is that get creative with it. Think about something else, because there was a reset button that was hit whenever the Reds let go of David Bell and hired Terry Francona. Everyone is now on board again, or at least for the most part, people are on board again. They're ready for opening day. They're ready for the Reds to play. Maybe they can like really beef up the Reds Winter Caravan thing, because they need to. They had a chance here, and this makes me even more upset that I was sick last year whenever Redsfest actually happened. But they really had a chance here to just build so much hype around this team. And you and I have both said in no certain words of like, Redsfest is probably second to opening day as far as like our favorite days on the year, when it comes to Reds baseball, and when it just comes to the year as a whole. So it's a big thing. And you know, the Enquirer is reporting this. This was an article that came out really just on Wednesday afternoon. But they said that whenever the Reds announced that they would be holding the Reds Community Fund Rick Steiner Memorial Texas Hold'em Poker Tournament on November in the Bally Sports Club at the stadium, they officially announced there will not be any sort of Redsfest this year. So as much as we've been holding out hope, because there's been the web page that is normally dedicated for Redsfest information on Reds.com now for a while has said that they do not anticipate holding Redsfest. We'd been holding to that little thread of hope, thinking that they would figure something out. They are officially announcing they're not figuring anything
out. I would have loved to have seen them do something at Heritage Bank Center, and maybe, you know, make the caravan stops bigger. So instead of, you know, at the local mall, have the caravan stops be the Heritage Bank Center, use UD Arena or the Nutter Center up in the Dayton area, you know, use the bigger arenas and have more for the fans. You know, and maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe somebody that has a say will pitch that idea before the caravan is announced, and they'll do something big. But listen, Jeff, while it is a bummer that we're not going to get to have Redsfest and go see some of our favorite players and maybe get a chance to hear Terry Francona talk, there is some things to pay attention to right now. There's some off-season stuff going on. Arizona Fall League is underway, and there's some guys doing some things out there. Now, let's start right here. We all know that Matt McClain got scratched and has not been back in the lineup since he was scratched.
Holding out hope that it's nothing.
We have not heard anything about an injury. So we're going to just reserve judgment until we hear something from the Reds of what's going on. We're not even going to speculate. But there's some other guys out there right now in Arizona, and they're doing some things, Jeff.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of great stuff from Tyler Callihan. I'd be interested in him a little bit, not as an opening day option in the outfield, not as a guy that you're like, all right, outfield problem is solved, we got Tyler Callihan. But I just kind of want to see his story continue, because he's a guy, talked about a little bit on yesterday's episode, that he really dealt with a lot of injuries in the minor leagues, and that's derailed his development. At one time, he was, and I forgot to mention this, but at one time he was rated in the Reds organizational top 30 rankings. He's outside of that now, he's been off the radar. So can he get himself back on that radar? I mean, TJ Friedel was not on anyone's radar whenever he was called up. So there's a possibility that maybe he could do something with that this season. I don't think we see him early on. And if we do see him early on, that means some things have really gone south. But he could be the kind of guy that works his way onto that depth chart through, if he continues to have this kind of an Arizona Fall League and if he can really show out in spring training.
Yeah, another guy that I don't expect to see early on next year, but that's also doing fairly well out in Arizona, that's Edwin Arroyo. 1 for 4 with a walk, scored 2 runs and a steal. Probably really does need some more minor league seasoning. He lost the whole year, and while I get, he's out in Arizona doing things, it's good to see him doing baseball activities. He probably starts the season at Double-A and hoping for an early promotion to Triple-A. If he performs well, I just can't see him even sniffing the big leagues before the All-Star break, if at all, in 2025. I think he needs a little more time to get ready.
No, and he's a guy that, and we said this about Rhett Lauder, and it actually came true. But if we see Edwin Arroyo in the major leagues next year, it's because it's a necessity thing. Yeah, I put it out there about Rhett Lauder, and it came true. So, sorry, put it out there again about Edwin Arroyo. Maybe it's early enough that it's not that big of a deal, but yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't think that we see him up, especially with the Reds coming out and making a grandiose statement that Ellie De La Cruz will not move from shortstop. I think that would probably be the biggest reason that Ellie De La Cruz moves to third base from shortstop, is that Edwin Arroyo is ready to go.
Not to be outdone, there are a couple pitchers out in Arizona, Jeff, that, they're doing some things. Some guys that aren't necessarily on really anybody's radar for doing anything other than being out there and getting some work in. Jose Acuna, 21-year-old, 3 scoreless innings, but he did walk 3 in those 3 scoreless innings. And then Luis May, 23-year-old, pitched a scoreless inning of relief for his second save. He had a walk and a strikeout. Hit 102 on the gun. So, that's only a little bit faster than I throw.
Speed. Yes, they
it's a lot of heat.
a little bit faster than you. Yeah, that's something that the Reds don't have a lot of. Their bullpen is very solid, but it's very thin on high speed. And I do kind of think that Graham Ashcraft could be that speed guy. He could hit 102, but the more the merrier. The only problem would be is the control. He's a guy that, looking at his career in the minor leagues, just has not had good control. And he's also a guy, I remember talking to Tom Nichols before the season last year, and he said, he's like, I'm very interested to watch Luis May pitch because he was doing some things down in Daytona, and he's probably going to set a record, which he ended up doing this past year, of throwing the hardest thrown ball in Dayton Dragons history. So he can just keep moving up through the system. Kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say late stage development. He's still 23, but we're not talking about a super young guy, though. Like, if he has that kind of control that at least gets you eyeballs and gets people watching you, we might be able to see him at some point next year, but he only just got to AAA.
Yeah, and he'll start back there in AAA, but that's a good guy to kind of have sitting down there in a pinch. You can come up and throw 102. You can muddle through a couple outings and help a bullpen out. So I look forward to seeing how some of these guys continue to develop. Again, we are reserving all of our opinions on Matt McLain till we hear something from the team. I thought it was great that he was going to be out there playing with his brother. The Reds need to let us know what's going on. And as soon as we find out, we will let you all know. And that, Jeff, is probably a good spot to go ahead and wrap it up for today. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks so much for making Locked On Reds your first listen every day. Every dayers, make sure you go check out the Locked On MLB podcast with our buddy Paul Francis Sullivan. You can call him Sully. He has you covered all through the Major League Baseball playoffs with his unique brand of wit, and he is a pretty funny guy, but he has a ton of baseball knowledge also. If you want to check out the Locked On MLB podcast, there is a link for it down in the description of today's show. You don't even have to go search for it. Just like us, it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Jeffrey, get us out of here.
Well, you know that we will always be all over the rumors about this Reds team as we get toward the offseason. We'll be all over the coaching hires as Terry Francona fills out his staff, because we will be Locked On Reds every single day. How many people you think enjoyed our show from the comfort of their own couch?
Oh, brother.